a lot of dressing up, as you can see. Well, anyway, it took several years and of absolute dogged determination by British Airways to put us out of business, to make Virgin Atlantic a financial success. But Virgin Atlantic's acceptance by both British, American and European travellers who didn't seem to mind that the same company that had just signed the Rolling Stones spurred all of us on to start breaking the rules in a few other areas. We wanted to see if this branded venture capital model could really work. And over the years, believe it or not, we've launched about 250 other companies in radio, financial services, health clubs, mobile phone businesses, etc., etc. Every time, though, we entered a different market sector, the same questions were asked of us. The financial journalists wanted to know when my balloon was going to burst. And talking of balloons, particularly here in Sweden, I was often asking myself and Per the same question too. Well, the marketing ones kept speculating that what we were doing was impossible. It would stretch the delicate Virgin brand too far. And we took a very head-on approach to these critics. We didn't ignore them, but we listened to them, and then we tried to rebut them on all fronts by continuing the steady growth of the businesses. Simply put, the best way to tell them they were wrong was to try to show them they were wrong. And over the years at Virgin, we have run all the major companies separately. We've brought in appropriate partners for each new part of the Virgin empire. We often agonized as to whether the critics were right, and that made us work extra hard to make sure that the promises of the brand were fulfilled. And we're now in 2008, and how the world has changed a great deal. Where once we were ridiculed for our expansion, Virgin's approach to doing business has become a studied phenomenon at business schools like Harvard and INSEAD. And I hope that the reason Virgin has been successful and continues to be successful is that we recognize that the public generally care about how the companies in which they choose to invest their trust, their loyalty and their money behave in the marketplace. And for many companies out there, I think it's worth remembering this. And if they don't remember this, governments must come down hard on them, no matter how difficult it may be for a politician to take on a big corporation. For real competition is what makes people strive to deliver a better product. And despite the events of the last few weeks, I firmly believe that if monitored properly, capitalism still does work. Every other system has been tried, and every other system has failed. But capitalism still brings with it extreme wealth to a few individuals and companies. So to become top of your profession as a businessman is actually no more difficult than going to the top of your profession as a nurse, or a doctor, a journalist, running the police force. But the difference is that reaching the top of your profession in business brings excessive wealth with it. And therefore, with wealth comes responsibility. Those who do command huge wealth have an equally huge responsibility to use that wealth constructively, to look closely at how they can possibly redistribute that wealth for the collective good. For example, if somebody sells a company, I believe they must not leave that money wasting away in a bank account. They should use that wealth creatively to change society, to start new companies, expand their existing businesses in new regions of the world, thereby employing more people and bringing opportunity to areas which have previously been exploitative and monopolistic. Wealth should be used to challenge the established way of doing things and to try to make a difference. If one's running a company, there's not only an ethical responsibility, but importantly, there are human responsibilities. And I fear that the majority of major companies forget this fact or hold it very low on their list of priorities. I've always believed that there's no point in going into business unless you're going to make an enormous difference. People who work for a company have got to feel passionately about their jobs. They've got to feel as though they're involved in what the company is trying to achieve. They must be proud of working for their company. They must look forward to going to work every day. They must feel part of the brand. They must feel part of the mission. Years ago, I found that every time I came home from a flight, I would put my loose foreign change in my top right-hand drawer and completely forget about it. It was only after the drawer was beginning to sag that I thought of all the other bedside cabinets across the country which must be suffering the same fate. Why shouldn't we try to collect that foreign change off people on their planes? And our staff loved the idea. They really felt they were making a difference. And we're now collecting millions of pounds every year for charities across the world. But the most rewarding thing was the fact that other airlines followed suit, and now hundreds of millions of pounds a year is being collected for worthwhile causes. Once again, the benefits of competition and of getting your people motivated by facilitating their desire to help others less fortunate. Mace Condoms is another example of how using business acumen and listening to the concern and everyday fears of your staff can be hugely successful when used for the benefit of others. Some years ago, when it looked like AIDS could become a really big problem, we set up a not-for-profit condoms company to try to encourage people to use condoms. Also, we wanted to encourage Durex, who had 98% of the British market, to spend more on promoting condoms and through awareness attempt to curb the spread of the disease. We even got the BBC to run an advertising campaign for the first time in their history, a proud and historic moment for everybody at Virgin. But moves like this meant that people working for Virgin companies felt even prouder of the company they worked for. So although these things may cost us money in an indirect way through staff morale, they were also good for business and good for the brand. Running a condom company also brings some interesting complaint letters. I once received a letter of complaint from a young lady to whom I wrote back a really grovelling apology, only to receive, almost 9 months later, a beautiful picture of mother and daughter asking me to be godfather. So, through founding mates, I also managed to find myself another goddaughter. If only all complaints had such adorable results. Well, when the world of setting up new businesses for Virgin, a world that I love, starts to occupy all of my waking thoughts, I try to remember the words of President Roosevelt 100 years ago when he rebuked men of vast wealth who do not fully realize that great responsibility must always go hand in hand with great privilege. In the same way that he believed that great countries have great responsibilities. Perhaps that only America could have realized that 8 years ago, but anyway. I've always tried to keep these sentiments at the forefront of my mind. And as with our Change for Children scheme, I truly hope that Virgin's announcements that we would invest $3 billion in the next 10 years in the renewable energy sector, using the dividends and equity realizations and other profits from our transportation businesses from around the world, will encourage other major global companies to follow suit. For some corporations, that kind of money could be seen as pocket change, but anyway, I fervently believe that the companies like ours have a duty to not only develop the most energy and environmentally efficient futures for our existing businesses, but also to invest in the future sources of renewable energy and fuel that could make such a difference to securing the technological and industrial future of Western society. We call this Virgin approach to business Gaia capitalism in honor of James Lovell, the well-known scientist who defied the skeptics in the 1970s to warn the world about the impact that climate change would have. And I believe this, together with our branded venture capital way of doing business, will help Virgin to make a real difference in the next decade, and not to be ashamed to make money at the same time. We're looking at every future transport technology and the fuels of the future to feed those technologies. But we also had quite a lot of fun doing it. 4 years ago, we had the chance to team up with my old friend Steve Fossett, who is sadly no longer alive, to build a revolutionary aircraft, the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer. It wasn't made of metal, but instead it used 100% carbon composite materials. It was extremely